So the Jacksonville Jaguars will be taking on the Detroit Lions this weekend in Week 13 at Ford Field. And damn, I can't believe it's Week 13 already, man. Enjoy the NFL season while we still have it, and it's disappearing before our very eyes. But I am extremely excited for this matchup. I think that there's a lot of intriguing headlines. Dan Campbell, I think, is a guy who a lot of players would run through a brick wall for. I think that he's a really good coach. I think that Doug Peterson has really implemented a different culture and regime in Jacksonville, and everyone believes in what Doug Peterson is doing in Jacksonville. Plus, both these teams sit at 4-7, and both of these teams are a lot better than their record actually indicates. Plus, we get the number 1 and number 2 overall pick in Trayvon Walker and Aiden Hutchinson getting to face off today, and I think that's something that a lot of Jaguar fans, and I'm sure Lions fans, are extremely excited about. But like I do with every single preview video, I'm always going to talk about the opponent first. So that's going to come with the Detroit Lions. I'll talk about them on both sides of the ball and some interesting things that I wanted to point out. Same thing with the Jaguars. I'll talk about them on the flip side, both sides of the ball, and then at the very end, I'll wrap things up and I'll give my verdict. So let's actually talk about the Detroit Lions right now. So as stated earlier, I do believe that the Detroit Lions, while they do sit at 4-7, they're the number 2 team in the NFC North. This team is a lot better than their record indicates, and they are now coming off 10 days of rest before playing the Jacksonville Jaguars after playing on Thanksgiving Day in a game versus the Buffalo Bills, which I thought was a great game. The Lions didn't get exploited on Thanksgiving for once. But Detroit, let's actually talk about their team ranks and where they sit statistically speaking overall. Detroit in points per game, they're number 8 in the NFL. Rushing yards per game, they're number 10. Passing yards per game, they're number 12. And total yards per game, they're number 8. So they do a very good job offensively speaking, especially at home at Ford Field. This team is a significantly better team than they are on the road. But defensively, the team sits at number 32 in opponent points per game. They are dead last in the NFL, allowing about 28 points per game defensively. Opponent rushing yards per game, they're number 30. Opponent passing yards per game, they're number 29. And opponent yards per game total, they are number 32 in the NFL. So every big statistical defensive category for the Lions, they are bottom 3 in the NFL. They are not a good defensive team at all. And while they do have some nice blue chip talent on that defense, which I'll get to in a little bit, the Lions defense is obviously one of the worst defenses in the NFL. Comes as no surprise. Their third down conversion percentage, they are number 14 in the NFL at about 40%. 20 sacks registered on the season, which is 26 in the NFL, so not doing a great job getting a lot of pressure. They are tied for 10th overall in the NFL with 9 total interceptions, and their turnover differential as of right now sits at 0, so not really bad, but not really good. You could be doing a lot worse. A guy I want to talk about specifically on the offensive side of the ball, first and foremost, is going to come with a guy like Jamal Williams, who came over from the Green Bay Packers. He was a great 1-2 punch with Aaron Jones, but now he is really taken over running back 1 responsibilities over a guy like DeAndre Swift, which coming into the season, I did not foresee happening. And Jamal Williams this season, 734 yards on the ground, which is 13th among all running backs. He is number 1 in rushing touchdowns with 13, which honestly, a lot of that is the goal line work. He's getting a lot of that work inside the 5-yard line. Former number 1 overall pick, Jared Goff, who they acquired from the Rams just last season. Jared Goff this season's actually been having a pretty solid and productive year. And like I said, specifically at home, he's playing a lot better, which I'll get to in a second. Jared Goff this season, 2,682 yards, tied for 9th among all NFL quarterbacks. 17 touchdowns, same thing, tied for 9th. 7 interceptions, so a 17-7 touchdown to interception ratio. I really like that, and a 58.4 quarterback rating, which is 11th among all NFL quarterbacks. And Jared Goff has played significantly better this season at home versus on the road. At home this season, Jared Goff is 1,547 yards, 15 touchdowns to 3 interceptions, a 5-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio at home. On the road, Jared Goff struggles mightily. 1,135 yards in the air, 2 touchdowns to 4 interceptions. Not good there at all. Their number 1 wide receiver, the guy who's really emerged last season, is really taken up a nice another leap this season, Amon-Ra St. Brown, wide receiver number 1 for the Detroit Lions. 65 receptions, 9th among all NFL wide receivers, 716 yards, 4 touchdowns, and all of his touchdowns actually came at home this season. DJ Chark only has 9 catches on the year. Former Jaguar, got nothing but love for him. Love seeing that he got that touchdown on Thanksgiving too. But DJ Chark just has always had injury problems, and I'm sure a lot of Lions fans can see that. I wish him nothing but the best. And then I want to flip it over to the defensive side of the ball for the Detroit Lions, because there's 3 players specifically that always have stuck out to me heading into the season, and rightfully so, it's still that way to me. I want to talk about their third-round pick, safety out of Illinois, a guy who I was extremely high on coming out of the draft, and Kirby Joseph. 2 forced fumbles this season, 3 interceptions, and 5 passes deflected. Kirby Joseph, coming out of Illinois, was playing a lot of deep cover 1 coverage, and I think that he's done a great job translating so far throughout the NFL game in the mid portion of his rookie season. He's a great ball hawk safety, and I like a lot of things that he's done. Let's talk about another guy in the secondary, former number 3 overall pick in the 2020 draft, Jeff Okudah, who has struggled to really stay on the field for a big majority of his career, but he's been relatively healthy so far this season, and I think it's been really good because Okudah, coming out of Ohio State, was obviously the cornerback number 1 next to CJ Henderson in that draft, former Jaguar. And Jeff Okudah had all the physicality, tools, and traits that you wanted to see out of a cornerback, and he's really putting it together this season. Jeff Okudah has 1 forced fumble. He had that 1 interception, 5 passes deflected, and he is questionable for this game with a concussion, so obviously I hope that he's okay, and I hope that he plays better. But that play specifically, where he got that pick 6 on Justin Fields, I believe that was either 2 weeks ago, if memory serves me correctly. I think that was 2 weeks ago. Great read by him, dropping back into coverage, reading the eyes of the quarterback, and being able to step up and make that play, because that play was really made by Aiden Hutchinson, who got off on Cole Kmet, I believe, and it was a screenplay. But instead, Justin Fields didn't throw that ball because Aiden Hutchinson realized he wasn't going to go after Justin Fields after the pressure was there. He dropped back into coverage because he's a very smart and defensive edge. He dropped back into coverage, forced Justin Fields not to throw that pass, and then made Fields overthrow that ball, and that's when Okudah came in and made that play on that pick 6. Great job by them. I mean, that was just hand-in-hand complimentary football. And then obviously I'm going to talk about Aiden Hutchinson just a little bit. 5.5 sacks this season, and 3 of those did come in that Commanders game, and a lot of those were handed to him, but nonetheless, Aiden Hutchinson does have 5.5 sacks, and he does have 2 interceptions on the season, which is actually a little bit crazy. I don't have his QB pressures. I don't have his tackles for loss. Everywhere I looked, I couldn't find those stats. PFF, it didn't matter really where I went. I couldn't find him for some reason. But Aiden Hutchinson definitely has stepped in and been a nice and solid productive player, getting some QB pressures. I talked about him a lot coming out of the draft because the Jaguars obviously have the number 1 overall pick. Loved his leadership qualities, and I also thought that he was immediately going to come into the NFL as a much more polished player versus guys like Kayvon Thibodeau and both Trayvon Walker. He possessed all the tools and traits that you wanted to see, and I think that he's done a nice and solid job so far throughout his rookie season. It's way too early to say Trayvon, Kayvon, or Aiden. Any of these guys have separated themselves from one another, but Aiden has definitely been a nice rookie. Enough talking about the Detroit Lions. There's a lot of things I like about this team. Let's actually talk about the Jacksonville Jaguars now. Talking about the Jaguars, let me actually talk about where this team ranks statistically speaking. On the offensive side of the ball, the Jaguars are number 16 in the NFL in points per game, number 9 in rushing yards per game, number 13 in passing yards per game, and they're number 9 in total yards per game. So they are basically an upper echelon type of team when you talk about their offensive ranks overall. Flip it over to the defensive side of the ball, not necessarily as much, even though they do have some nice talent on the defense. The Jaguars defense has struggled, I would say, for a majority of the year, and they've had their moments, ups and downs, with Mike Caldwell now as the defensive coordinator. The Jaguars are tied for 14th in the NFL in defensive points per game, allowing about 21.1 points per game. Off opponent rushing yards per game, the Jaguars are number 15. Opponent passing yards per game, they're number 25 in the NFL. Opponent yards per game, they're number 24. And then the Jaguars on the third down conversion percentage, they're doing a pretty good job. They're number 12 in the NFL, converting about 41% of those. 16 sacks this year, which is really, I think, in the bottom 5 or bottom 6, if memory serves me correctly. The Jaguars front 7 is not doing enough to get home and sack the quarterback enough. And the Jaguars do have 9 interceptions on the season so far, which is amazing considering the fact that the Jaguars had 9 defensive turnovers created as a whole last season, and we already have just 9 interceptions, and the Jaguars are +2 in turnover differential. The Jaguars are doing a lot better of a job there after taking care of the ball last week and also creating 3 turnovers versus the Kansas City Chiefs just a few weeks ago. I have to start by talking about quarterback at the helm, Trevor Lawrence, aka Mr. Sunshine. The guy has had a revelation. He's really stepped up to the task, and we've all seen Trevor Lawrence now take that next step up that we've all been waiting for, and I've been one of the biggest, most vocal supporters of Trevor Lawrence, defending him, and also, understanding that he's a young player in a first year in a brand new system with Doug Peterson and Press Taylor, a lot of new pieces, and a lot of people were treating this like his rookie season, even though I never said that. Trevor Lawrence has really taken that next step up this season, and you've seen it. So far this season, Trevor Lawrence, 2,655 yards in the air, which is 11th in the NFL, 16 touchdowns to 6 interceptions. I like that ratio a lot. And he's 16th in quarterback rating, 54.1. But Trevor Lawrence, these last 3 games, has been playing out of his mind. Trevor Lawrence has been completing 77.2% of his passes. He has 815 yards in the air, 6 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, and has a QBR and has a passer rating of 114.9. And then let's actually look at the Jaguars' 4 wins versus the Jaguars' 7 wins, how Trevor Lawrence has performed, because it is night and day in the Jaguars' 4 wins versus their losses. So Trevor Lawrence in the Jaguars' 4 wins this season has 1,053 yards in the air, 78.1 completion percentage, 9 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, 120.6 rating, and also he'd been sacked only 4 times. In the Jaguars' 7 losses this season, Trevor Lawrence has 1,602 yards, a 60% completion percentage, 7 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, has a QB rating of 78.4, and he's been sacked 17 times in those losses. Trevor Lawrence, it's night and day. When he performs well, the Jaguars win. When he doesn't or he struggles, and obviously it's not always on him, but sometimes it is, the Jaguars tend to lose. Another explosive player that the Jaguars really did not have last week after he left the game with a foot injury early on and JaMycal Hasty really stepped up to the task was running back Travis Etienne, who has been a revelation for the Jaguars, and he's brought a different explosive element to this team. 133 attempts on the season, 728 yards, 4 touchdowns, and he's averaging 5.5 yards a carry, which is 8th among all NFL running backs. And he has also chipped in the receiving game as well too. 22 catches for 202 yards. Etienne has brought an explosive element to this offense that the Jaguars desperately needed. I think he brings that level of familiarity to the backfield like they had back in college for Trevor Lawrence and both Travis Etienne. And also, he just has that home run hit ability. I know we haven't really seen Travis Etienne take a huge 50, 60 yarder to the house, but it's, soon. And I think that Travis Etienne is going to be bound to have a good week. And like JaMycal Hasty, he did step in and stepped up to the task whenever Travis Etienne went down. We'll see if Darrell Henderson, the Jaguars, just claimed him off the waivers just a few weeks ago. We'll see if he gets any snaps this week. That remains to be seen. Let's actually talk about the Jaguars wide receiver 1 in Christian Kirk this season. 56 receptions, 725 yards, 7 touchdowns among all wide receivers, which is tied for 4th, and he's averaging 12.9 yards per reception. And Christian Kirk has been a great and reliable target for Trevor Lawrence all season. Big plays. He stepped up to the task last week and was the unsung hero for the Jaguars last week, especially converting on that 2-point game-winning drive. And it was amazing to see what Zay Jones did. Obviously, Marvin Jones Jr. and both Jamal Agnew are going to be returning to Detroit. And then I want to flip it over to the Jaguars' defensive side of the ball. And the first guy I have to talk about, who I probably don't talk about enough, but I think it goes without saying, is our elite, and I'm fully convinced to say that, elite cornerback number 1, 2nd-round pick out of Georgia last season, Tyson Campbell himself. Tyson Campbell this season, 1 forced fumble, 2 interceptions. He has 8 passes deflected. And speaking of passes deflected, the Jaguars have 3 guys on the defensive side of the ball who are top 20 in the NFL in passes deflected. The only team in the NFL with 3 or more guys in there, and Andre Sisco, Rayshon Jenkins, and both Tyson Campbell. Tyson Campbell this season, you have not heard his name really outside of Devontae Adams beating him, and I think it was Terry McLaurin in that week 1 performance versus the Commanders, really getting beat for touchdowns. Tyson Campbell's been a lockdown corner all season, and he's taken that next step up like we saw from the back end of his rookie season. Tyson Campbell held Mike Williams to 2 catches for 18 yards on 6 targets. He held A.J. Brown to 2 catches for 24 yards on 4 targets. Brandon Cooks to 4 receptions for 38 yards on 6 targets. And Cortland Sutton to 0 catches on 2 targets. Tyson Campbell is that guy. They are not throwing to his side of the field, and rightfully. Another guy I got to talk about is obviously number 1 overall pick, Trayvon Walker. I already kind of addressed it. He has 2.5 sacks on the season. He had that 1 interception in the week 1 performance versus the Washington Commanders. And like Aiden Hutchinson, I couldn't find none of his QB pressures or his tackles for loss, things of that nature. So it's kind of hard to gauge that. And Trayvon Walker really doesn't have many pass rushing moves as of right now. I think what's really hurting him is maybe not more so the system that he's in, but also just the rookie's ups and downs. Josh Allen has not been really getting home to the quarterback like we expected out of him. And Trayvon Walker, like I said, it's just too early to call him, Kayvon, or Aiden Hutchinson. Any of these guys have taken that, next step or that next tier above one another. It's too early to say so. And the last thing I want to say with the Jaguars defense right now is Mike Caldwell and both Doug Peterson did make the change to start Chad Muma at the Mike position next to Foye Oluokun, and I think that tremendously helped out the defense in a lot of ways. You saw that Oluokun had an amazing performance last week versus the Baltimore Ravens. It looked like Muma really fit in seamlessly, and Devin Lloyd has been having his ups and downs where Devin Lloyd looks like the future linebacker one of the team, and he's really came into his own, and then there's times where Devin Lloyd looks absolutely lost out there. Chad Muma, said by Mike Caldwell, was able to calm things down a lot more, and also you could tell Oluokun was a lot more set, getting these pre-snap coverages ready and together, and he was just a lot more vocal out there. I still think Devin Lloyd long-term is the linebacker of the future for the Jaguars, but I'm not knocking Chad Muma. He's done some great things, and in his snaps this season, especially last week, he's done some great things, man. Whatever is going to help the Jaguars win games right now, I'm all for it, and I just had to point that out. Kind of getting into the verdict of this, I do have the Jaguars narrowly winning this game, but honestly, I'm not overlooking the Lions. I don't think the Jaguars community is, and I doubt that the Lions community is. Both of these teams, as stated, I think that they're better than their record actually indicates, and both of these teams have a lot of blue chip talent on both sides of the ball. Dan Campbell's a great coach. I think that Doug Peterson's obviously a great coach, former Super Bowl winning head coach. My final score prediction, I think that this game is absolutely going to go down to the wire. I think this is going to come down to a field goal kick. I think that the Jaguars win this game 21-24. I think that one of these teams is going to get off to an extremely hot start. I think that one of these teams is going to get out to an early 14-3, 17-0 lead, and then eventually the second half, it's really going to come back, and you're going to see a tight finish to this game. I expect it to be a great game. I think that Trevor Lawrence and the rest of this team is going to be really prepared for the Lions. I think that Dan Campbell's got this team ready, locked and loaded, but this is going to be a great matchup, I believe. And I'm excited to see what the Jaguars can do at Ford Field, man. I'm excited to see how the Lions go up against the Jaguars this season. But Jaguar fans and Lions fans, please let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. This is probably the longest preview video I've ever made, so I apologize about that. If you guys actually did stick around, thank you so much though, but please make sure you guys go and drop me a thumbs up. It takes 1 second and it helps me on the channel out tremendously. And if you guys are new here, consider hitting that subscribe bell to stay tuned for more NBA, UCF, and of course, Jaguars content that I do here on YouTube. And make sure y'all go follow me on my socials, especially on Twitter. I'm very active and I'm on there every single day. The link tree will be in the description down below. But thanks again for sticking around throughout the whole video. Brett James, AKA BJ. I'm out, y'all. Go Jags, baby. Peace.